So hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I am joined by Jason Glover of Grey Gnome Games. Thanks so much for being here, Jason.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jason is an indie tabletop game designer and publisher who ran 12 successful Kickstarter campaigns for his games before shifting to publishing his games directly through the Game Crafter website and utilizing their crowd sales program, which we'll talk more about later. So 8 of the top 10 most sold games through crowd sales on the Game Crafter were not only designed, but illustrated by Jason as well. These games include Tin Helm, Dust Runner, and Gates, which are just a few of the many games that Jason has created. So Jason, can you please tell us just a bit more about yourself and a brief overview of your journey as a game designer?
Well, I would say I don't want to go back too far or take too much time, but I was always into drawing and art and comics and stuff as a kid. My mom was very encouraging of that. I had a few mentors. My 4th grade school teacher had a little thing she did called Pick a Pickle, and on Fridays when there was some downtime, we'd draw one and it would have something for us to do. Could be anything, draw a picture of your house or something. And one of them was design a board game and play with a classmate. And I was hooked. And every week I pretended to pick a pickle and I would just make them another board game. And the teacher let me. And I thank her for that because she saw that that was my passion, let me do it. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And then I had friends that were playing Dungeons and Dragons. This was back in the 80s and early 90s and stuff. So I got my head wrapped into that kind of world a little bit. But it wasn't until the recession hit in 09 or 2010 when I started having more free time. I'm a plumber by trade, so work got slow. So I had all this free time. So what did I do? I went back to my passion and I started Grey Gnome Games and started running Kickstarters. So that's sort of gets you up to date, sort of. So
yeah, no, that's really great. So you mentioned, so you went into running Kickstarters and you actually ran 12, which is quite a few.
Over a 5-year span from 2012 to 2017, I ran 12 of them.
Wow. So you're averaging like 2 campaigns a year or so.
Yep.
That's, while having a full-time job as well.
I was always in one phase of it. So anyone who's done a lot of Kickstarters will know it's like I'm either developing a new game, I'm shipping at the same time an older game, I'm working with manufacturers on another. It's just, it was a constant time. My time was out the window. Plus I was working a daytime job. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, your time management skills must be just like so good for you to be able to do all that. Because when I heard that you aren't even doing, you're still not doing this full time, you still have a full-time day job, but the number of games that you've made and also illustrated, like how do you manage all of those things?
It's all about following what you love to do. So some people like to go hiking, which I also like to do, but everyone has their passion. They do that and it's not work. So when I have my free time, this is what I do and I enjoy it. It's meditative for me to do illustration, have a podcast on in the background or whatnot. And that's what gets me through life. So work is what puts food on the table, but this is what my passion is. So I find the time.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really nice when you get into the flow of something and you just really get into it. It's just really, it's what life really is about at the end of the day. So, so maybe now you can tell us a bit more about how you shifted and you moved away from running Kickstarters to selling your games directly through the Game Crafter. And maybe for people who don't know how that works, maybe you can tell them how the Game Crafter works to sell your games directly through them.
Sure. Well, I had always used the Game Crafter for prototypes and stuff. And when I was mocking up things before I went to Kickstarter, because they make a good product, and it's only gotten better over time, honestly. But I did my Kickstarters, and as I just described, my life was chaotic for 5 years. I was spending more and more time doing the things that I didn't enjoy as a game designer or an artist. I was packaging and shipping 1,000 games, or whatever it might be. It's all these taxes and all these things that were, I obviously still do taxes, but they were more complicated. All the things that go into being a publisher. was not really what I enjoyed doing. What I enjoyed doing was art. I enjoyed doing the drawing, designing the game, developing the game, and all that. So I felt like I wasn't being as productive as I could be. So the Game Crafter with crowd sales allowed me to simply do the part that I enjoy, which is the designing of the game and the illustrating of the game. And then I just upload those files to the Game Crafter, and everyone can get it then. And they handle all the fulfillment and all of that stuff. So all the things I didn't like that was ick to me. Maybe someone likes to ship and print out labels and do all that. I don't know who they are. They should probably be on some kind of watch list, because that's not normal behavior. But personally, I couldn't do that anymore. It's too much. So the Game Crafter allows for me to just do what I like to do, is the bottom line. And the crowd sale platform, JT actually, the owner of the Game Crafter, came to me when he kind of started having the basic ideas of it, and was brainstorming a little bit with me because he knew I had experience with Kickstarter. And he had this concept of the more backers, the cost of the game will come down. Now, I've seen this before. I think Miniature Market or some of retailers for board games have similar things like that. The more a game sells, the price comes down or something. I've seen something like it before, but not in a crowd funding format like the Game Crafter's crowd sales. And I thought it was brilliant, because when I was designing all these games and running Kickstarters, not one of the hardest, but a difficult thing is stretch goals. So you're constantly, I have my game, I'm done with it. Now I have to come up with weird things to add to it to appease backers, because we got so many backers, or whatever, however you might do your stretch goals. Or worst case, you're like, I've seen or heard of people that would design a game and take things out and then add those things as Kickstarter. So you're not giving a full game experience. So it's one or the other. You're either adding something that's not really required, or you're not giving it in the beginning anyways. And I don't like that. I'd rather design a game. It's done. This is the game. This is everything. You don't need anything else. And if we get 50 backers, it costs this much. If we get 500 backers, it costs much less for everybody. And to me, that just makes more sense. You're passing the savings of manufacturing on directly to the customer. They get to see that, and I think that's a much better system.
Yeah, and it's really nice how, like you said, you have the game ready to go, and then the Game Crafter can kick in to actually manufacture and then send it out right away. So rather than traditional Kickstarters, where then the backer would have to wait a year or 2 years or whatever it is to actually get the game, that turnaround would be a lot faster with that model, which I'm sure the backers appreciate.
It's definitely quicker. Even some people have gotten so used to how quick it is now that there's more games on the crowd sale. There's a little bit more of a time space between when they deliver, but it's usually within 6 months. And some people still kind of frown at that because they're not used to purchasing something and having to wait 6 months. And that's kind of what it is. But the reason they do that is they're doing that one whole order. The only way they can save all that money for everyone is manufacturing it all at the same time. That makes sense. You're doing the same repetitive thing over and over and over. You drive the cost down. And it goes into a separate queue when it's a crowd sale or a bulk fulfillment. And those orders are just go in the queue. And so now they take a little bit longer. It's not the 3 months it used to be. It's more like 6 months, but sometimes it's less. Sometimes it'll tell a backer it's not going to be here till August, and it shows up in May. So it just don't know. That part's the estimate's off. I always tell people, don't worry, it's not going to be as long as it says, because it normally isn't.
Right. Nice. So for people who are thinking about maybe putting their game up as a crowd sale rather than a Kickstarter, or I've even seen some designers who might have part of their project on Kickstarter and then also link to the crowd sale for another part of it. For any designers who are thinking about like, okay, well, maybe I haven't thought about crowd sales before. I've only heard about Kickstarter or GameFound. What are some advice you might have for them about how to run a crowd sale?
The hardest part, I would say, is the marketing aspect of it. I'm lucky in that I had those 5 years established through Kickstarter, that's where I built my following. And shifting to the crowd sales, I didn't really see a huge decline in participation from backers. But if someone who's starting out fresh and new, even if your game looks really nice, and it is a good game, it's going to be a little more difficult. That's just the facts of the matter. It's going to be harder to promote it because the Game Crafters crowd sale doesn't get as many eyes as you will get through Kickstarter. So I would say either have your lower expectations is one, which is no one wants to hear. Probably the solution to it would be run a Kickstarter, but you can use the Game Crafters bulk fulfillment system to fulfill that order. Or you can use another manufacturer. But I would say if you're not fully established, Kickstarter it worked for me. So I'm not going to tell someone something that I don't have any experience with. What worked for me was being that exposure from Kickstarter. So if you have a really good design, you can use, like I said, the Game Crafter. They'll actually manufacture and fulfill the whole Kickstarter for you. They have that service. So you can go that route. And it's kind of a happy medium because then you'll get the exposure that you need as a newer designer.
Yeah, that's a really cool sort of hybrid idea to kind of leverage both things. Yeah, that's
and
really
then
cool.
if it's successful, then you can transition down the road. Maybe you do 1 or 2 Kickstarters, and then you have that group of people who know this guy or this gal, she makes this. I like what this is, and then they'll follow you over. So
right, kind of how you're exclusively now on the Game Crafter because you don't necessarily need that extra exposure that Kickstarter has because you've grown your audience enough that you can rely on.
And I'm sure if I were to run a Kickstarter, I could probably do very, very well right now, just with the following that I have, plus new exposure or whatnot. I'm sure it would do well, but then it's that whole can of worms again. I have to deal with the manufacturers and all of that, or I could do it through the Game Crafter as well. I've thought about that as well, but I don't know. I really just like the crowd sales format of the price going down, and you really can't simulate that through Kickstarter.
And is the crowd sale always a month long, or can you decide how long you want the sale to be?
The designer / publisher, you decide how long it's for. I usually say 2 weeks is probably a good window. If you go longer than that, I even noticed in Kickstarters, I think my first Kickstarter I did 45 days. I don't know what I was thinking. Very long. And then you get this huge dry spell in the middle. And it's psychologically not good for you as the creator, and it really destroys momentum in the project. No one's talking about it for a month. So I always say 2 weeks is a good number to go for.
Yeah, and then the backers kind of have that sense of urgency. You either need to back it now.
You give them long enough for the word to spread, but there's always that urgency.
Yeah, that's really cool. So just talking about sort of advice for designers who might think about this as an option, just selling on the Game Crafter in general. So you can use the crowd sale to generate that initial interest. Then after that, you can leave your game up on the Game Crafter to be sold at regular price. What tips would you give designers who might want to put their games up on the Game Crafter? Should they focus more on solo games or multiplayer games? And just thinking about the component size and the size of the game and the pricing, things like that.
I think where the Game Crafter really shines is niche game ideas. So the solo board game community is pretty large, especially since COVID. That really helped unfortunately, it was a side effect. A lot of people were home. They were buying solo games. So there's a big market for solo games, and then just specialty things that are a little bit more unique and off-brand. So if you're trying to make the next Uno and you put it on the Game Crafter, it's probably going to be hard to sell. But if it's something unique, it'll grab more people's attention.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine party games might be a little of a tougher sell for just the the market that uses the Game Crafter and that look for games on the Game Crafter.
Right. People go to the Game Crafter, they're looking for something unique and different. And a lot of times art is important. I think that's helped catapult some of my games is the people's eyes are drawn to good art. I mean, and not that I'm saying I'm a great artist or anything, but I'm saying that if you have something that can attract someone's eyes rather than just clip art or something, then that's very helpful.
Yeah, that's really great that you have that skill as well, so you can handle the art as well as designing the game. And
Yes.
yeah. And I'm just curious how you make your art. Do you do it all digitally, or do you do it hand drawn and then take a photo and scan it, or like how do you incorporate your art into the game?
I would say 90% or more of my art is digital. I have sketchbooks and notebooks. I went to college and I took a lot of art courses and illustration courses. So I can do art by hand, but doing it digitally is just so much easier, so much faster. I can just, you have different layers. I can just change things on the fly and make corrections. So yes, I do everything by hand, but digitally for the most part.
That's really cool because your art looks hand drawn. So that's surprising.
Yeah, I have a Wacom tablet, a nice one, and so I'm drawing with a pen. It feels pretty natural, but it's so much easier to make edits and change things. And I want this to be this color. That's easy. I can just change the color, and that's much more difficult to do. Like for free time, I like painting on canvas, but I'm not going to paint on canvas all my monsters in a game. That would just be insane. I mean, I don't have the time for that. So
no, that's really cool. So you illustrate your games, you design your games, you publish. You've had quite a bit of success with the crowd sales and the Kickstarter. So like I said, I was surprised to hear that you aren't doing this full time, but you've mentioned that it is something you want to be doing full time. I think you said in the next 5 years or so. So can you tell us a bit more about that goal and any steps that you're taking to reach it?
Well, interestingly, financially, I could probably do it in a couple of years, but I just got a new position at my company, and it starts in about 2 or 3 weeks, and it's going to be a lot less physically active and indoors all year round. And I live in Chicagoland area, so people that live around here know what that means. It's a big upgrade for me, especially from a physical standpoint. So I might actually stick around plumbing for a while, just because for pension purposes, why wouldn't I?
Sure.
But I think that will allow me, I won't be as exhausted physically. So I think that alone will be very helpful for me. And then at any point that I feel like, okay, I'm done, I'm pushing 50 in a couple of years here. Maybe in my mid 50s, when I feel like I want to be done, I can walk away from plumbing and do this full time. But I'll be in the position pretty shortly where I can exit whenever I kind of want to. But I kind of like still working. Part of me just likes it. So I don't know why I have a problem.
No, that's great. And it seems to be in a great position to be in. It's up to you to decide when it feels right or when you want to make that transition. So that you have that option is really fantastic. And would the majority of your income come from the crowd sales? But I think you also have print and plays, or what are the different sort of income streams?
Well, right now I would say crowd sales are probably a little less than half of my income from the Game Crafter. I haven't really looked at the numbers, but I do sell just through the Game Crafter on a pretty regular basis, so that makes up most of the income from that. And then I have a game published through Bud & Shy Stew, so I get royalties from that. And I do other little things like that help subsidize the income. Another thing I'm thinking about that I haven't really talked about publicly is maybe doing a Patreon at some point, which would allow people to, I have free art assets on my Gray Gnome site for aspiring designers where they can pick. I have over, I think, 100 black and white illustrations that I hand drew that people can use in their games commercial free, no cost. And I would like to do a Patreon where maybe I do more detailed type work like that, and then Patreons would get art for their games, and then also maybe have print and play cards and stuff for some of my games as also another tier, maybe for people who just are interested in the game aspect of what I do. So they'd be able to get special cards you wouldn't be able to get, and they can print them and play them themselves. So stuff like that. That would be another avenue I'm thinking about if I were to go full time.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Have you thought about doing a coloring book?
I thought about doing a coloring book just like yesterday or the day before. I was illustrating one of my new little characters, and I'm like, it'd be fun to do a coloring book just because of, I was literally coloring one of my, I just finished the line drawing, and then I was doing the color layer, and I was like, this would be kind of fun as a coloring book. And I was like, maybe we can get other artists together and make like a joint effort coloring book. That'd be kind of fun. So that'd be something I would definitely consider doing.
Yeah. I think your art would really be conducive to a color.
Especially if I knew that was the intent, I would do it a little differently to make it easier for that. So.
Right. Cool. And so I think you just wrapped up one of your latest crowd sales for Dust Runners, the follow-up to Dust Runner. Can you tell us a bit about how that crowd sale went, and anything maybe you learned that maybe was different from previous crowd sales?
Yeah, it went about as well as I expected it to go. It wasn't a standalone expansion, so it was just an expansion to a game that was fairly successful. And so obviously the numbers are, you're never going to sell more of an expansion than you are of the base game. So a lot of people are always like, don't make expansions, make them all standalone. Well, it's like, I don't want to make it. I did that for Tin Helm. I made Tin Realm. Tin Realm's a completely standalone game, but it's also like you can use parts from each game with each other. But yeah, it did pretty well. I mean, obviously it was a success for me, and I'm very happy that it also, the part that I was most excited about was that I think I sold 300 new copies of the base game in that crowd sale. So that makes me happy to see the game itself growing like that.
So Dust Runner, and I believe some of your other games, are mint tin games. So they're kind of like smaller, almost micro sort of games. Was that an intentional design decision because you knew you would be selling via the Game Crafter and you wanted to keep costs down as much as possible?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I started the Tin series with Gate, it was me basically, it's a challenge. It's twofold. One is it keeps costs down. The smaller the game, especially the Game Crafter, per card is more expensive, obviously, than if I were to have something manufactured overseas. But also, I love the challenge as a designer, trying to fit an experience into a small container. Just that alone is like a puzzle for me, and that gets my gears going in my brain. How can I make this work? How can there still be theme? So I always have the card counts in my head. It's 18 of the mint tin cards and 32 of the mini cards is sort of the base for my game design. So I always have those numbers. This is what I have. What can I do with it? And how can I do it in different ways? I can make it a deck builder like with Gates, or a different type of game, like Dust Runner. So yeah, it's a fun challenge, but also, yes, if you're designing games, definitely think about the cost of the game, especially in the Game Crafter, because I do see crowd sales popping up on the Game Crafter. They look beautiful, really good artwork, and they look very, very well play tested and all of that. But they're newer designers, and the game's $79, and it's very hard pill for a potential customer to swallow, purchasing something that expensive from someone they don't know. Right. So I try to stay away from higher priced items. The highest thing I have on there right now is Iron Helm, and it's just under $60. And then right now working, or have been working for years, on UnderQuest, and that should be coming out this summer, and that'll be my most expensive game. I don't have an exact figure, but it's going to be probably in the $75 price range, just because I am using the Game Crafter. If I were to make it overseas, I could probably shave off a little bit of money. But it's not like I'm making a killing on it profit-wise, but I just want to get the game out there, and this is how I like to do it. So
another thing that I saw about the Game Crafter sort of design restrictions that designers should probably think about before they put a game up on the Game Crafter is, I believe the age minimum is 12 years, and I think that's for some legal reasons or something 12, like that. Yes, so kids games would, right. So then kids games would probably be not a great idea to try and put up on the Game Crafter. You can put them on there. It's not a problem. You just have to mark on the box 12 plus, even if it makes no sense. Even if you've made tic-tac-toe, a new version of tic-tac-toe, you're going to still have to, you have to say 12 plus, just because then the liability is off the Game Crafter, because technically they're the publisher. If you think about it, they're kind of, right. They're not really the publisher, but they're kind of, in a lot of ways, they would be liable, I think, if something were to happen. So 12 plus, it keeps them safe, and then you don't have to do any of the testing that's required to say your game is made for 8 plus or 4 plus or whatnot, because there's a lot of testing you have to do and get done. Right.
I just avoid that altogether. I just make a little bit more graphic games. So you shoot people and stuff.
Right. So it might be a good idea for designers who are interested in doing this just to put in the components of the game in the Game Crafter and just see how much that would potentially cost to manufacture. Like if they were to just order a prototype for themselves, would that give them sort of a general ballpark of what it would cost to then sell it on Game Crafter?
Yeah, I would just upload all your files, or I've even sometimes put just blank cards in there and just built the game with all the components I need, even if there's no art or anything on it, just to see what the costs are. Even though you can kind of go through, you don't really necessarily even need to do that. You can go through their product page and figure it all out on a piece of paper if you want to take the time to do that. But if you want to just make a actual thing, you can do that. You don't have to publish it, obviously, and just, that's probably the easiest way to see what it's going to cost you, and you can adjust in there your profit. I think it's preset to add $5. But you can adjust up or down and manually control that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there, but thank you so much for joining me today, Jason. That was really so interesting to learn more about your process and how you've used these different platforms that a lot of designers I don't think are even aware of our options to them. So that was really, really insightful. Are there any upcoming project that you'd like to shout out, and also where can people connect with you online?
Well, if you type in Gray Gnome pretty much in a Google search, you can find my X and Facebook and all of that stuff. Graygnome.com is my website, so you can go there and you can see my library of games. And like I said, I have those free art assets and things there. I do little designer journals. I'll post in there as well from time to time what I'm working on at the current moment. But yeah, that's how you connect with me. The only thing I'm working on right now, I'm trying to stay focused on UnderQuest, and I have some more illustrating to do for that, and the game mats to design, and the rule book to make, and so I'm getting towards the end of the design process, but I'm very excited.
And if people want to hear about when that launches, do you have an email list that they can join?
Yes, you can go actually to the website, and that's probably the easiest way, is to go to graygnome.com and subscribe to that page, because I will obviously announce the launch there. Or really, the place I'm most active is the Facebook page for Gray Gnome. I post probably once a day on there, so if you're on there and you follow that page, then you're probably going to get a heads up.
Okay, awesome. I will link to all of that below as well in case anyone wants to check that out. So thanks so much again, Jason. This was really awesome having you here today.
Thanks for having me.